The Wild said, we'll see your separator goal and give you a separator period. 2 Kirill Kaprizov goals, a Marcus Johansson goal, a Matt Boldy goal, and a Dakota Mermis goal back Marc-Andre Fleury as the Wild win both ends of a back-to-back on the West Coast to keep themselves right in the thick of the Western Conference playoff push. And yes, before we get things started, Joel Eriksson Ek is going to be fine. Let's talk about it tonight on tonight's Locked On Wild Postcast. Time to fire it up.
You are Locked On Wild Postcast, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into a late Locked On Wild Postcast here tonight as the Minnesota Wild pick up a 5-2 win over the Seattle Kraken. And right off the bat, let's get to the big news of the night. Joel Eriksson Ek is going to be fine. John Hines was, dare I say, dismissal about Joel Eriksson Ek's status after the game. And I just want to make sure that I get the exact quote correct from John Hines after the game. As Joe Smith tweeted out, actually, no, that's not where that was. Somebody tweeted out the literal exchange. John Hines just could not have been more ready for that question to be done. Joel Eriksson Ek is going to be fine. So I would imagine that it was fully precautionary and just decided at that point with a 5-1 lead that there was really no reason to have to try to keep him in for tonight's game. And so the Minnesota Wilds pick up a relatively stress-free 5-2 win over the Seattle Kraken. Kraken scored the first goal of the game, and after that, it was pretty much all Minnesota Wild. And I got to level with you folks. I had a very crap day today. And so the fact that this was a late game allowed me the opportunity to wash things away a little bit. And I was actually excited for a late night tilt just to kind of take my mind off of everything that happened throughout the day. And look, there was really a lot of good that the Wild accomplished in tonight's game. Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Boldy continued to stay hot. Boldy embarrassed Joe Cord on that goal with the backhand, and Kaprizov scored twice. It was, it was a good performance from pretty much everybody up and down the lineup. Marcus Johansson scored a goal tonight. He nearly had a second on a wraparound attempt, and the Wild scored on the power play. This was one of those games this year in which there really wasn't. Honestly, I'm struggling to come up with anything even to point to. John Merrill was jumping up in the play offensively and playing a role in this one this evening. So I was really glad that the Wild were able to just make this a stress-free one for me, especially tonight. Like just a game against a team that you should beat and you needed to beat. And the Wild didn't leave any doubt in this one. They were physical. They gave Seattle fits. Seattle fell into the same trap that many teams have fallen into here recently as they put the Wild on a 5-on-3. And guess what's going to happen if you put the Wild on a 5-on-3? You're going to have a bad time. And Kaprizov able to just tuck one directly past Joey Decord. And Joey Decord has been pretty good recently. So it's not as though the Wild were getting, and I know this is something that has been put out there over the last few games. The Wild have had a couple of instances in which they've gotten backup goalies. Joey Decord's numbers, even with what happens tonight, he has a 2.79 goals against average and a .924 save percentage, even with the fact that he gave up 4 goals tonight in 22 minutes. So he's been playing well, and the Wild were able to make him look like a rag doll. So this is one of those games in which the Wild had a lot go right, and just continue to kind of feed off of what has gone well for them recently. The Wild's, and like, let me combat some of the things that I've said here recently that the Wilds continue to do. I've said over the last few games, you got to get a second line to be able to consistently assist the top line taking the full lead. And Marcus Johansson gets a goal tonight. Matt Zuccarello had 4 assists in tonight's game. And so not only did the top line continue their run that they've been on, as Denny noting in the comments, and I'll keep an eye on this, Denny, to see if it does get posted here while we're on the air. Top line continues to be just absurdly good. Second line chipped in tonight. And so check that box off. The goaltending has been up and down throughout the course of the season. Marc-Andre Fleury had a good night tonight. And I don't know, maybe it's the fact that I just was super, like, just super in need of something to take my mind off everything and make me feel good. I always root for Marc-Andre Fleury to play well, and he did tonight. Picked up a big win here for the Minnesota Wild, and you keep yourself in the conversation. Like, as we look at the playoff standings right now, the Wild are 2 points back of the St. Louis Blues and the Nashville Predators with 62 points. The Wild have 60 points. They banked a head-to-head win against the Seattle Kraken, and you're a point ahead of both the Seattle Kraken and the Calgary Flames. Both of those teams have continued to win, but at this point in the season, all you can ask for the Wild, I guess, in the playoff picture is just to keep pace. You're 2 points out right now. Continue to keep pace if you are a team that wants to be, if you want to be a worthy dance partner. That's all we've ever asked for as this season has gone on. If you want to be a worthy dance partner, show that you are one. Wild are keeping pace right now and are continuing to keep themselves in the conversation. That's really all we can ask for at this point. Let's go through some of the other numbers here for tonight's game. And just looking at the overall numbers for the game, the Wild as a team blocked 22 shots tonight. So that is a pretty good indicator of the fact that guys wanted this game tonight. And, this is another thing too. This is another encouraging thing for the Minnesota Wild, because I looked at their numbers in back-to-backs this season. They're 3-13-2, I think the number was, in back-to-backs before this back-to-back. There were no indicators that the Wild were the team on the second night of a back-to-back tonight. They had the energy throughout the game. They pushed in the offensive zone. They did a good job of putting the pressure on Seattle throughout the entirety of the night. If you would have told me that one of these teams played on a back-to-back, I would have said it was the Kraken. And so credit to the Wilds for not allowing that they were on a back-to-back to be an excuse in this one and turning it into something that just did not factor into the outcome here at all. Let me just pull up the stats for the last week. We're on Kirill Kaprizov Star of the Week watch. And so I'm just going to pull up the stats for this week, the 18th through the... Oh, come on. That's not what I was looking for. There we go. Get stats. Kaprizov is currently tied, or did tie, I should say, with JT Miller in points. He had 4 goals, 5 assists. Miller had 5 goals and 4 assists. Mitch Marner had 10 points this week with a goal and 9 assists. So I would imagine the 3 players that will be stars this week, unless was there any outrageous goalie performance over the course of this week? Let me just pop that up too. I don't know if there were any goalies that just absolutely popped off here this week either. Igor Shesterkin had 4 wins and a 2.03 goals against average. That's not what I would call. It's good numbers. So maybe he gets some consideration for this. But the fact that you've got 3 guys who are over 2 points per game over the course of the last week leads me to believe that it's probably going to be more on the offensive end here tonight. And Joel Eriksson Ek, to his credit, he was 4th in the NHL this week with 8 points in 3 games. So Matt Boldy was 10th, 6 points in 3 games. So some good work by that top line that just continues to be like we've been looking for a while for a legitimate top line. I think you got one in Eriksson Ek and Kaprizov and Boldy, and they just work so well together while they're out there on the ice. So that was great to see for the Wild here tonight. So again, there's really not a lot that you can pick from in this game that did not go that didn't go well. Wild controlled the special teams. They were 2 of 6 on the power play, and the Kraken were 0 for 5. So the Wilds dominated the special teams ends tonight. They got the better of the goaltending, and they had their top guys show up. That's a great formula to win. It's a great formula to win games, and the Wild had every single bit of that formula here tonight. So we've got a lot to discuss for not only what this game means, but kind of how we process it. I want to get to some of Mike's comments too. He was actually at the game tonight against the Kraken, so he had a chance to see Marc-Andre Fleury in person. So we'll talk about all that. We'll continue tonight's Locked On Wild Postcast coming up here in just a bit. The Minnesota Wild win by a score of 5-3 over the 5-2, excuse me, over the Seattle Kraken. We will discuss more of tonight's game after this. Tonight's Locked On Wild Postcast is brought to you by Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Plus, listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Again, Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Tonight's Locked On Wild Postcast is also brought to you by Ibotta. Grocery bills are so expensive these days, but now they don't have to be. Start getting cash back on your grocery shopping with the free Ibotta app and get cash back every time you shop. Do you love making money but also love spending money? Don't we all? Now you can make money while you spend it every time you shop with Ibotta. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, just add your offers in the app, upload your receipt, and you get real cash that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Join the over 50 million users and earn cash back every time you shop from over 2,700 brands and retailers, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONNHL when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONNHL. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKEDONNHL. Minnesota Wild win tonight by a score of 5-2 as they take down the Seattle Kraken, and we will be taking your comments here as we move through the rest of the show. And just to hit on the key breaking news for tonight's game, as John Hines confirmed after the game, he could not have dismissed the Joel Eriksson Ek injury any more than he did. He said, I don't see anything that is going to, I think he's going to be fine. I don't see anything that suggests that he'll be out or will miss any games. So Joel Eriksson Ek is okay. Brandon Duhaime laid a little bit of judgment at the end for that hit, an awkward hit into the corner of the boards that led to Joel Eriksson Ek leaving the game early. But again, does not look like there's going to be anything there that would lead to him missing any time. So the top line gets to stay intact. And this Wild team is jumping on their back as they carry them through these last few games. So that was a big sigh of relief at the end. And thankfully, it's not anything that we're going to have to worry about going forward. Kaprizov's finally getting going again with a few multi-goals games stacked up. Let's look at the Kirill Kaprizov stats here over the last several mini games for the Wild. Kaprizov has scored 6 goals in the last 4 games. He has 5 goals so far in the month of February. He's got 15 total points in that span. And folks, Kirill Kaprizov's numbers just continue to rise. So right now, he's at 60 points in 50 games, 24 goals, 36 assists. He's on pace for 86 points, 35 goals, and 52 assists. If you would have told me at the beginning of the season, considering how slow of a start it was for Kirill, I would say you're nuts at those potential numbers for Kirill. But here we are, and he's playing with that full confidence. He has the full repertoire at his arsenal. But I think the fact that he's got Matt Boldy and Joel Eriksson Ek with him has allowed him to be comfortable with doing whatever he needs to do, whether it be one of those otherworldly passes or the alien saucers. Feels like he's got the whole thing timed out to where he can just do whatever he needs to do. And can be confident that his teammates are going to be able to help him make the plays. So this top line is molten lava hot right now. I'm going to skip ahead in the comments a little bit because Denny had the exact numbers for these line mates. As in 8 games together, 47 points, 21 goals. Folks, that is far and away above a heater for those guys. They just continue to play absolutely out of their minds And it's a huge reason as to why this team continues to rattle off wins. Eddie joining us tonight, and I will, because it seems like we have new listeners on almost a nightly basis. Typically for these postcasts, what we like to do is wait until after the player interviews are done, and after John Hines has had an opportunity to talk with the media, just so that to not that ad on ESPN, just so that if there's anything noteworthy that pops up in any of the interviews or the post-game press conference, that we have a chance to discuss it here. Perfect case tonight in Hines giving an update on Joel Eriksson Ek's status. So typically after the Hines presser is done, we like to fire up and go live once that is finished. Just so that if there's anything that breaks that's newsworthy, we can lead the show off with that. Perfect opportunity to see that in action here tonight. Just looking at some of the other comments here this evening, no doubt about it, I'm ready to get hurt again. We are back, baby. And, you know, this is the interesting part about kind of would you rather see this team take a high draft pick or fight to the end, get into the playoffs, face high odds of whoever they end up going against? It's pretty clear, and it's always been clear, I think, that the way that Bill Guerin is operating things is that this team is fighting to get into the playoffs. And so every game that they have is key, because if you are going to be a team that climbs the mountain and gets to the postseason, you'd like to have a little breathing room to avoid any potential, like we just got back into it and all of a sudden then we go on a skid where you lose 5 out of 6. You want a little bit of breathing room. But the last 2 nights, the Wild beat in the Edmonton Oilers, one of the hottest teams in the NHL last night, a team firmly in the postseason conversation, and a team that hadn't lost a game at home since December in the Edmonton Oilers, and a team that rarely ever loses at home. And then you play the next night on the second end of a back-to-back, and the Wild won that one too. And so for this Minnesota Wild team, I'm going to lay this out like this, because it seems like we're getting a more vocal part of a more vocal side of the coin of those that are hoping that this is a postseason filled season for the Minnesota Wild. Some things that will need to be addressed before the end of the season if this team is going to make the playoffs and do anything. You've got your top line. You have put together your top line that can contend with anybody else in the Western Conference. Like, we can't deny that. Boldy, Kaprizov, and Eriksson Ek is on par with many of, if not all of, the top lines throughout the rest of the Western Conference. I mean, you've got some elite level high-end talent for like Colorado, but you stack that Kaprizov, Boldy, and Eriksson Ek line up against anybody else, it plays. It certainly plays. The big thing for this Minnesota Wild team is going to be what that second line is able to do. Tonight, Marcus Johansson came up with a goal. In fact, I'm pretty sure everybody on that second line had at least a point in tonight's game against the Seattle Kraken. Marcus Johansson had the goal in 14 minutes, 21 seconds. Matt Zuccarello had 4 assists tonight and was a +2 in 18 minutes. Ryan Hartman had an assist and was a +2 in 17 minutes, 26 seconds. That second line was very active tonight and played a nice complementary role to what the top line did from a leading perspective. You're going to need that consistently as this season pushes down the stretch and moves into this stretch of games in which you absolutely have to have. You've got to have a second line that can consistently step up and be part of the equation as the season unfolds. So tonight, the Wild did that. The goaltending for this Wild team is something that has been up and down throughout the season. Now, if you look at Marc-Andre Fleury's most recent few starts, he's been good. The lone exception was that game against Winnipeg. He gave up 5 goals there. But beyond that, in Fleury's last 5 starts, he's only given up, and actually, in Marc-Andre Fleury's last 8 appearances, 2 of those were in relief. One of them was a start. That game against the Florida Panthers in which he left early. In Marc-Andre Fleury's last 7 appearances, he's only given up more than 2 goals 1 time. That was the game against Winnipeg in which the Jets scored 5. Gave up 2 tonight against the Kraken. He did give up 2 in relief against Vancouver, but just 1 against Arizona, 2 against Pittsburgh. Started the game against the Florida Panthers and gave up just 1 through the first 30 minutes. Shut out the Islanders. And so he has been able to help solidify the goaltending position a little bit more for the Wild. So that's another thing you're going to need to consistently have. Special teams is another. The power play has been very good for the Minnesota Wild recently. They've been able to just melt teams on the power play. Penalty kill, good tonight, 5 for 5. That's going to be another one. And look, we've seen all these areas get picked apart in the postseason. And it's possible that this is just the same script that we've seen over the last couple of years. But this Minnesota Wild team, like we've seen really good stretches from this team this season. We've seen them beat really, really tough teams. It's on the Wild as to how the rest of this season plays out. If they really sense the moment and are able to go on a little bit of a run here, you know, who's to say what could happen? But a big key to this season has been inconsistency for this this Minnesota Wild team. Inconsistency has been a big factor all season. And so it's looked good recently. The Wild are near the top of the list in the NHL in wins since the All-Star break. But you've got some big games coming up this week. Nashville for one. You've got St. Louis coming up next weekend. Like, those are games that you got to have. Those are games that you need to have against teams that you're jockeying with in the current playoff picture. And so you have to bring your A game in order to come away with wins against those teams. That's where we're at with it. Like, if you win those games, if you can continue to play this level that you've played at since the All-Star break, if you can continue to push that through these next few games, then you can start to convince people that you are trending towards a potential postseason team. We just want to see it consistently is all. Because you get 3 or 4 wins in a row, then a bad loss, then a couple more wins, then a head scratcher game. Let's cut out some of those head scratcher games at least. You're not gonna win every game the rest of the way. And so let's just try for consistency and try for continued good performances from those top level guys. And let's just go from there. Any stats on where X line ranks in points? Has to be near the top lately. We did touch on that just now, that those guys continue to lead the way in pretty much every statistical category. And honestly, I'll even back it up to February 7th, because that was the point in which that line was put together. So since February 7th, Kirill Kaprizov is 5th in the NHL in points with 15. Joel Eriksson Ek is 6th with 14. Matt Boldy is 8th with 13. That's in the entirety of the NHL. Connor McDavid's still leading the NHL in points. He has not scored a goal in the last 8 games. He has 19 assists. That's something else. But he just continues to get it done. Marc-Andre Fleury was great, but our other main French Canadian was typically useless unless I missed something. No, Eddie, you did not. Marcus Johansson scored the goal and he nearly had a second. Freddie Gaudreau tonight, 13 minutes, 31 seconds. Zeros again. He did win 4 out of 5 faceoffs, so that was a positive for Gaudreau tonight. He played 5 minutes and 33 seconds on the penalty kill. That unit was perfect tonight. So I'll even throw... That's continuing to play. It's irritating. I will throw Freddie a bone tonight that he contributed. He actually had the most time, and Eriksson Ek took a couple of penalties tonight. Freddie had the most time on the penalty kill tonight amongst forwards with 5:33. So he contributed there, and he was 4 of 5 in the faceoff circle. Beyond that, no shots, no anything else. And beyond that, there were only a couple of guys in the lineup that did not attempt shots in this game tonight. Jake Lucchini and Connor Dewar were the only other two that did not get at least a shot on goal in this game tonight. So, and hey, how about Dakota Mermis' game tonight? He had a goal tonight. He had 4 blocks, got 12 minutes, got some time on the penalty kill. Declan Chisholm getting some time on the penalty kill tonight as well. He played 21 minutes, 26 seconds, had a shot, 3 blocks, and a hit. Chisholm has had 3 points in 5 games since he was acquired. And honestly, he's looking right at home with this Minnesota Wild team, which is great because there are a couple of spots on D that are going to be open when the season is done. And if Chisholm can take a spot, one of those spots, that would be fantastic for the Wild. That would be fantastic for the Wild to get good contribution for him for basically nothing. You would hope Duhaime would get better at fighting. Brandon Duhaime has had a rough go in the fighting circle over the last few weeks, pretty much this entire season. He has not been great in the fight circle, but sticking up for Joel Eriksson Ek at the end of the game. It was not a great fight for Brandon Duhaime. Hoptics, can we start talking about who the Wild will acquire before the deadline? Give us your guidance. So here's my thoughts on the trade deadline. let's count Declan Chisholm as a deadline acquisition, which looks as though that is one that is going to work out nicely for this Minnesota Wild team. The offensive instinct for Chisholm is very, very apparent every time he handles the puck. And he isn't somebody that I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this. He just isn't somebody defensively that takes major risks. And sometimes that leads to you kind of maybe playing back when you should be aggressive. But save for maybe the one time against Edmonton where he kind of got walked by Leon Draisaitl, then again, who hasn't been walked by Leon Draisaitl? Beyond that, haven't really had a ton of opportunities in which he has looked out of place defensively. And so I know that was the discussion on him coming in, is that he has really, really good skills offensively and a good offensive acumen, and the defense is kind of a work in progress. Honestly, if this is where his defense is at a work in progress, like, I'm sold on what you can turn Declan Chisholm into. So let's consider Chisholm as one of the deadline acquisitions by Bill Guerin, which definitely worked out really well. Beyond that, the Wild have a current glut of players, both offensively and defensively. You have 8 defensemen as of right now, with Jared Spurgeon out. You've got Faber, Middleton, Brodin. Bogosian will be working his way back into the mix. Chisholm, Mermis, Merrill, Goligoski. So defensively, you're probably going to, if you were going to do anything, you'd have to move one of those Merrill and Goligoskis, probably. Or Mermis. I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, but you'd have to move somebody off the roster currently. And I think the Wilds, with Chisholm in the mix, and now that we've seen him be able to step into a more elevated role and be fine, I think the Wild probably view their decor, I think they're comfortable with it right now, with the fact that Chisholm has shown that he can play a bigger role. I think we'll see him get that. Now, obviously, when Bogosian comes back, you maybe slot him in with Brodin, or maybe you just leave Chisholm with Brodin. If you like that pairing has done some good things since they were put together, since Bogosian came out of the lineup. So maybe you just keep Bogosian as a third pairing defenseman. I don't get the sense that there's going to be any sort of another acquisition defensively. And the forward groups are currently dealing with Maroon being out, Foligno being out. And so when those guys come back with Mason Shaw also in the mix, you got to figure out who is leaving. Now you can, as Michael Russo tweeted, you can carry more than 23 players after the trade deadline, as long as you are cap compliant by the time you get to the trade deadline. And the Wild are right now, because they've got, $5-ish million to play with Jared Spurgeon being on long-term injured reserve for the rest of the season. If there is anything that is going to be done in the ad department, there's going to need to be I think, some movement to just clean up a little bit of that bottom 6. There are a bunch of players in the mix right now. And so I don't know It is entirely possible that the Wild add somebody by the deadline if they continue to stay on course as they have. But there are some questions in that bottom six that would have to be answered, figured out. There's still some tweaking that can be done with that bottom six. I think whether it be Zuccarello, Johansson, and Rossi, or Hartman, as was the case tonight, I don't think that second line is going to change a ton, but there is some room to do some things with that third and fourth line to try to find those right combinations there. So it's entirely possible, and this was always going to be the case too, is this team would dictate what happens at the deadline by their play leading up to it. The Wild have $5-ish million in cap space. So they can, if they find the right something to add to this mix. And I'm seeing a bunch of comments here regarding the goaltending. You know, that's a huge key to this as well. It's just a matter of this team keeping this going and picking up wins against these teams that they're chasing, that they're in the mix with. That's then when that's just when things start to really pop. Swiffer T, Wet Jet Mop. Chisholm has looked good offensively every game, but I thought he's looked better on defense these last few games. Yeah, this is entirely accurate. He just, and again, I'll speak to it one more time, that he doesn't take a ton of risks. Like, he doesn't make risky plays defensively. He's just very kind of sure of where he's at, and uses that to his benefit. Like, I remember the first game that he played, one of the guys up in the stats booth, the NHL stats booth, made mention of the fact that he just looked like he was in the middle of the ice the entire game. And that's because, you know, he hadn't played in 2.5 months. And so he was trying to get a sense of kind of where his teammates were at, what's going on. And he has really grown in confidence since. And honestly, like, our gain is Winnipeg's loss, because just to follow up with that, to answer Eddie's question, let's not forget Winnipeg chose to keep Logan Stanley instead of Declan Chisholm, because Logan Stanley is like a giraffe on skates, and they valued the size over the skill. And where did that get him? It got him to the point that that the Wild were able to pick Chisholm up for literally nothing, just claimed him off waivers, and it just worked out perfectly well for the Minnesota Wild. Where'd that comment go? Denny's got a good one, and I want to get to here we go. Ian's. What is the most recent update on Marat Kuznetsov? What are the odds he still comes over and actually plays? So Kuznetsov's season ends tomorrow for Sochi. They're not going to make the playoffs. So his season is done, and at that point, he is fully free to sign with the Minnesota Wilds. And as they did with Brock Faber, it seems likely the Wild will burn one of the years on that ELC to get him here and allow him the opportunity to immediately get called up. Immediately. And honestly, I would love to get a little sense as to where Kuznetsov is at and how he could potentially fit in this mix. Because if you even just to start, throw him in on like the, I don't know, third line, just adding him into the mix allows another weapon. And what do we know, folks? What do we know about the young players for this Minnesota Wild team? Be it Marco Rossi, be it Brock Faber, be it Declan Chisholm, be it Matt Boldy. What do we know about those young players on this team? They're going to work hard. They are going to do things that impact the game on almost a nightly basis. I'm not saying that he is like the missing piece for this team, but maybe Kuznetsov can come in and can help restore a little bit of order to this bottom six by simply being a guy. Like, imagine putting him, and I know he profiles, at least at this point, as more of a center, but imagine he can play wing too. Imagine putting him on the line with Marco Rossi as a young winger that is going to motor, battle his tail off, and generate some opportunities. You could certainly do worse there. I know Hines loves the combination of Lucchini, Rossi, and Lettieri, but honestly, at this point, if Foligno comes back soon, if you add Kuznetsov to the mix, it's probably going to be Lucchini that gets called down, that gets sent down first off, because he's the one that, like, you would have to put him on waivers, but I don't know that he necessarily is going to get claimed. Then beyond that, there just are a lot of questions with the bottom six. I would love some clarity into that bottom six situation. Denny noting there is a third line center in Carolina that the Wild are looking into, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and looking at his statistics for the season, he's got 10 goals, 10 assists on the year for Carolina. Would be an interesting ad. He's 6'2", 201, and just looking at Kotkaniemi's stats for his career, scored 18 goals last season in 82 games with the Hurricanes. He's also played for Montreal. He is 23 years old. This would be another opportunity, if Carolina has soured on him a tad, to maybe buy low on a guy that you could potentially throw into the mix for your team going forward. So I'm gonna say something too. I'm gonna give a little credit. I'm in a credit giving mood because the Wilds helped ease what, again, was a mostly crap day for me. If Carolina has soured on Kotkaniemi at 23 years old and Bill Guerin takes a flyer, gives them something in return for that, I'm way more in favor of Bill Guerin taking flyers on young players to see if there's a chance that he can work them into the mix than bringing in vets to try to add to what is a roster that already has a ton of them. So if that ends up being a route that the Wild go, a 23-year-old guy who's winning faceoffs at a just under 50% clip, depending on the asking price, I really have a hard time finding a ton of issue with that. And yeah, it could be that it doesn't end up working out. There obviously, if that's something that Carolina does, there's probably a little bit of a reason that they are looking to move on. But change of scenery is a thing. And if it works out, then that's just another young player that you can add to your mix going forward. over these next couple of seasons. So I'm very intrigued by that. Might require a little bit of an additional dig into that one. Got to beat divisional opponents too. Yeah, this game does not erase the 0 for 7 against Winnipeg, Dallas, and Colorado. And not even necessarily those teams. You've got Nashville coming up, you've got St. Louis coming up, and those are in that must-win category. Those are in that category of games that you just need to win to get yourself some breathing room, like get yourself above water, and give yourself a little bit of breathing room so that if you have a little bit of a skid, you're not instantly falling back out of the postseason picture. Kraken fans are nicer than Avs fans too, which was nice. Although more Wild fans show up in Denver than in Seattle, I would say not as big of a hockey market here. Yeah, that makes sense. It'll take a little while for Seattle to kind of get things established. It's still new enough that fans are not fully decided if they're in or if they're out yet for Seattle hockey, and it'll get there. I'd rather have Kuznetsov over Freddie. That's where I'm at with Freddie. Rather have a question mark than whatever Freddie provides. I'm right there with you. Freddie is basically playing a fourth line role right now. And by that, I mean he is filling a fourth line role. And so honestly, like I had somebody in the comments ask about what you do with Gaudreau. I think it was Mike actually that was asking about that. Like, what do you do with Gaudreau and Johansson? I think Johansson's deal is harmless enough at $2 million a season. And that deal being done after next season is over. I think there are still some options at play if you really sour on what he's doing, to where you could move him to a team that says, yeah, we'll take a veteran for $2 million. The biggest issue with the Gaudreau contract is the term. 4 years after this year at $2.1 million per season. And it just continues to feel like he was Dean Evason's guy. It was Dean Evason's security blanket, which led to his numbers being inflated because he was playing every situation down the stretch, clutch face-offs, playing in overtime, playing on the power play and the penalty kill, prominently, one might add. And then John Hines got here and he was like, oh, Joel Eriksson Ek is much better. I'm just going to use him as my critical go-to guy in particular situations. And it just feels like Freddie has kind of been on an island throughout this season. He just hasn't really found a consistent line combination yet and has just kind of been moving through the season quite listlessly as things go. Here's another one from Minnesota Mary. My brother and I were discussing the goalie situation. Should the Wild go back and forth between the goalies for the near future, or should they declare a number one? It's, I think we've seen them be pretty consistent with will split if they're not playing particularly well. If one goalie goes on a little bit of a hot stretch, then we'll ride them a little bit. I would just keep that at this point. If Fleury goes on a heater, then yeah, roll with him. If not, if Gus does, you can roll with him at that point. Oh, Kotkaniemi has 5 seasons left after this one at $4.82 million per season. That's going to take some maneuvering if you're the Minnesota Wilds to make that happen. I did not know, should have probably looked at that before we discussed it. That's a large figure for the Wild to have to try to work into their books. And again, it's, after next season, 2025, 2026, it's really not an issue. But next year, it would absolutely be an issue. Now, you could have Carolina retain part of it, certainly. But that complicates things considerably on the trade front. Why did Dean like him so much? This is a valid question, and one that I find myself asking considerably often. I think just because, I don't know. They had history from the minor leagues together. That certainly is something that weighs in. His success in the shootout. Dean obviously loved the shootouts, so that's another part of it. Maybe liked his nickname, Steady Freddy. I don't know. Beyond that, it just, like, I kind of find myself laughing at the fact that the moment John Hines came in, he was like, and I wonder if they asked Hines, like, when he took over, like, now who's going to be your go-to center? And he surveys the options and he's like, why wouldn't it just be Joel Eriksson Ek? I'm like, yeah, that's a good choice. Joel Eriksson Ek is certainly very good. And Hines is like, of course he's good. He's the best center he's the best center on the roster. So it just, I don't know. There's a lot that goes into that. And it's multiple things at once that have led to Gaudreau getting that contract, which 100% was because Dean was the head coach. Like, it's just how that goes. My wife, who knows nothing about hockey, asked me why Freddie skates so strange. Said he does not look like a hockey player. Yeah, I don't know about that one. No one likes shootouts. Gary Bettman defended the shootouts, and I ripped him for it because it's true. Nobody likes the shootouts. Nobody likes the shootouts, and to compound it, nobody likes overtime in which both teams just hang on to the puck to give themselves a rest period before the shootout. Like, huge thumbs down to that. Fans liked Freddie too. How many times were we cheering phone booth Freddie last year and when he lit it up with Fiala and Boldy? A lot. A lot of the time. Like, honestly, and I want to be clear on this. The $2.1 million for Gaudreau is really not a problem, because as the cap goes up, that's going to be the going rate for players like that. $2.1 million is not a problem. It's just the fact that the Wilds went to 5 years and trade protection on that deal. Like, if you give him a 2-year deal, 2-year extension, we are not having this conversation right now. Because even with this being a down, like a very, very down year, you can you then get Freddie Gaudreau on a contract year next year, where his performance hopefully maybe rebounds. I just was not a fan of that contract, even more than the Foligno contract, even more than the Hartman contract. Freddie Gaudreau is at the top of the list for me from a contract perspective in the ones that I just am like, definitely don't get that one. But there's plenty of time to discuss that. Speculation on Denny's part, you could be seeing a 3 or a 4 player trade coming. Interesting. Well, that's going to take a little figuring to put that together. And I completely forgot what I was going to say. But I think since we hit the hour mark and since it's just about 1:30, I'm gassed. The Wilds pick up a nice win against the Seattle Kraken. Honestly, it was really low stress. Joel Eriksson Ek is going to be fine. You've got a big game coming up against the Carolina Hurricanes on Tuesday, and you're right in the thick of this thing. You're 2 points back of St. Louis and Nashville, and so it's full. Whether we agree with it or not, it is very evident at this point that the Wilds are pushing. They are pushing for the postseason at this point in the year. And so we'll continue to keep an eye on how that goes. We'll continue to look at everything as we do. Locked On Wild has every angle covered, no stone left unturned. And that will continue tomorrow for our Locked On Wild Live. We'll start at noon, and honestly, just before we go. So here's what my thoughts are for tomorrow's show. I think we're going to just start, and since this is going to be a YouTube exclusive, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open it up at noon and kind of get people's thoughts as to what they would like to see with these live shows. And then we'll go live and we'll chat about this team and we'll kind of set the stage for the week. We'll talk about the top line continuing to dominate. You name it, we will discuss it on tomorrow's Locked On Wild Live. So we look forward to seeing you tomorrow, later today. That is at noon. And yeah, I'm gonna go to bed and dream about more goals for the top line combo. So thanks everybody for joining. Make sure to hit the like button before you head out for the night, and we'll see you tomorrow for a Locked On Wild Live. You can make sure to find all of our content here at Locked On Wild by subscribing so you don't miss out on any new episodes or any live streams throughout the rest of the season. We have all sorts of content coming up for you as well the rest of the season, so make sure you don't miss out. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.